It's the year 2000, Palo Alto, California. The dot-com bubble has just burst, leaving a trail of digital wreckage in its wake. Yet a scruffy, little-known entrepreneur named Reed Hastings is about to walk into a meeting that could change everything. He's the co-founder of a small DVD-by-mail company called Netflix. He's here to sell his company and his vision to the king of the industry, John Antioco, the CEO of Blockbuster. Sitting across from him is John Antioco, the CEO of Blockbuster. Antioco is the monarch of a retail empire with over 9,000 stores and billions of dollars in revenue, largely generated from one notorious source, late fees. Antioco is enjoying the fruits of success based on a simple physical transaction. For him, this isn't just a business, it's a proven model, codified by decades of American consumer behavior. It feels invincible. Hastings pitches his offer. We'll be your online arm. You promote us in your stores. You can even brand us as Blockbuster.com. We'll handle the digital future for you. All we ask for is $50 million. It wasn't just an offer of acquisition. It was a partnership that would serve as a parachute for Blockbuster into the next century. Antioco and his executive team listened. They couldn't stop themselves. They started laughing, a heavy, patronizing laughter that filled the corporate silence. They mock Hastings. The internet is a fad, they scoff. Subscription models? That eliminates our entire margin structure. And DVDs? They only appeal to rich Silicon Valley nerds. They couldn't take the idea seriously. The arrogance in that room was palpable. It was thick enough to cut with a knife. Reed Hastings left that meeting feeling humiliated and empty-handed. However, he also left with a quiet, burning conviction. Blockbuster had just rejected its own future. They had dismissed the very technology that would destroy their empire and transform the entire entertainment industry. They had done it for $50 million, the most expensive laugh in corporate history. This is the story of Blockbuster, the Blockbuster from which you probably rented movies every Friday night. It's the story of how they held the future in their hands, dismissed it as a joke, and slowly and tragically drowned in their own late fees. This is the $50 million mistake, and the ultimate financial lesson in prioritizing present success over future viability. To grasp the magnitude of Blockbuster's blunder, we must remember just how enormous the company was in the 1990s. First founded in 1985, the company expanded with breathtaking ferocity, fueled by substantial investment from waste management executive Wayne Huizenga and later global acquisition by Viacom. They weren't just a successful company, they were a corporate behemoth that achieved true market saturation. Imagine a time before streaming and digital downloads. If you wanted to watch a film, you went to Blockbuster. It was an event, searching the new releases wall, finding the last available copy of a Blockbuster hit, and taking in the distinct smell of popcorn and plastic. At its peak in 2004, Blockbuster had over 9,000 stores worldwide and more than 80,000 employees, generating over $5 billion in annual revenue. Through sheer physical scale and aggressive expansion, they had conquered the world, building an infrastructure that seemed impossible to challenge. However, like many dominant giants, Blockbuster's colossal size masked a critical systemic vulnerability. Its empire was built on a very specific and ultimately toxic revenue stream: late fees. This was the financial core of the tragedy. You rent a tape for $3.99 for 2 nights. If you forget to return it, the fee starts to accrue. This fee, which required almost no input cost from Blockbuster, was pure high-margin profit. By the late 1990s, late fees accounted for almost 16% of Blockbuster's entire operating revenue, generating hundreds of millions of dollars. This created a severe psychological addiction within the corporate structure. Every new business idea and potential innovation was filtered through one lens: will this impact our late fee revenue? The answer was always yes, and therefore innovation was systematically rejected. Consumers hated the fee, but executives loved the margin. They prioritized a revenue stream based on customer resentment over a subscription model based on customer satisfaction. They were so busy counting the pennies from the fines that they failed to see the billions being made from convenience. Enter Netflix. Reed Hastings' frustration over a $40 late fee for Apollo 13 became the accidental catalyst for a revolution. He envisioned a service that decoupled the rental from the penalty. For a flat monthly fee, say $19.99, you could keep the DVDs for as long as you wanted. This directly challenged Blockbuster's most profitable yet unpopular business practice. When Hastings offered Blockbuster the opportunity to buy his company in 2000, Netflix was still a fledgling business. They were mailing physical DVDs, a process that was both complex and expensive. They were losing money every day. They were in desperate need of Blockbuster's brand power, massive physical inventory, and financial backing. However, Blockbuster's management didn't see this as a potential lifeline. They saw it as a joke. Rather than seeing a $50 million investment in the future, they saw an immediate threat to the late fee division that had made them rich. John Antioco later admitted that they simply could not take the offer seriously. This decision was not just a technological mistake, but also a profound financial and cultural one. They failed to understand that the true value was shifting from physical access, their business model, to convenient distribution, Netflix business model. Rather than killing Netflix, the rejection galvanized them. They persevered, gradually expanding their subscriber base and proving that people were willing to pay extra for predictability and convenience. But Blockbuster remained complacent for years. They continued to expand their physical presence, opening new stores in every town and suburb, and in every major city around the world. This massive physical infrastructure, which was once their greatest asset, was rapidly transforming into a crippling liability. It wasn't until 2004 that Blockbuster finally attempted to fight back, realizing that the threat was real. They launched Blockbuster Total Access. This hybrid model offered mail-order DVDs, like Netflix, with the added convenience of being able to return the discs to a physical store. For a brief moment, it seemed like Blockbuster might leverage its 9,000 stores to win. However, the plan was doomed due to internal cultural warfare. The retail store managers, the old guard, whose bonuses and status were tied to the revenue from late fees generated by physical transactions, actively resisted and sabotaged the new online division. They made in-store returns for Total Access members confusing or difficult, and prioritized pushing expensive in-store rentals over the hybrid service. This internal conflict, the battle between the high-margin past and the low-margin future, crippled Blockbuster's ability to execute a unified strategy. The company was at war with itself and unable to commit fully to the digital pivot because organizational incentives favored the dying physical model. Then came the true existential crisis, the streaming revolution. In 2007, Netflix pivoted again, moving away from its dependence on physical discs towards online streaming, a move they called Watch Now. This required significant investment in licensing content and building server farms. But it instantly rendered Blockbuster obsolete. The difference in operational costs was staggering. Blockbuster had to maintain expensive retail locations, pay electricity bills, manage complex physical inventory, requiring thousands of employees to sort, stack, and check tapes and discs, and pay the salaries of all 80,000 employees. In contrast, Netflix was replacing physical storefronts with server racks and physical inventory with digital licensing agreements. Their infrastructure was lean and scalable, and, most importantly, free from the crushing fixed costs of real estate. Desperate to catch up, Blockbuster launched its own streaming service, Blockbuster On Demand, but it was too little, too late. They lacked the necessary content, licensing relationships, and bandwidth infrastructure. Consumers had already migrated elsewhere. In the digital age, speed and convenience are paramount, and Blockbuster was neither. The company finally filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in September 2010. The stores were hemorrhaging money. The giant was simply too slow and unwieldy to adapt. What was once a great asset, the enormous portfolio of retail leases and physical inventory, was now a multi-billion-dollar toxic liability that had to be liquidated. Today, Netflix is a global production and distribution powerhouse worth hundreds of billions of dollars, while the Blockbuster name has become an obscure footnote. The few surviving independent Blockbuster stores are charming relics, but their existence merely serves to highlight the former corporation's utter failure. The Blockbuster story is not just a tale of a $50 million missed opportunity. It is a profound lesson in finance, corporate culture, and disruption. It shows us that sticking to a profitable but ultimately unsustainable business model, such as their reliance on late fees, is a recipe for disaster. It shows how internal politics and financial incentives within a large corporation can blind even the most dominant players to existential threats. Blockbuster failed to prioritize agility over scale and ultimately paid the price. They saw the future, laughed at it, and were ultimately drowned by it. The greatest financial mistakes are often not made out of ignorance, but out of paralyzing hubris and a stubborn refusal to change a successful model.